Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with Power of Perception Radio Network. We are on the verge of what is bound to be an exciting program this evening as professional wrestling superstar Del Wilkes, otherwise known to wrestling fans as the Patriot, will be joining us momentarily. We're going to be talking about his documentary, The Man Behind the Mask. We're going to talk about his wrestling career, some of his time in football, overcoming the odds with painkiller addiction and other issues related to drug addiction and the injury that took him out of commission from the sport that he loved and away from all the fans that loved him. And I do believe that this is Del now. Area code 803, you are live and on the air. Who's this one calling from?
Hey, guys, it's Del. How you doing?
Doing very well, and we actually do have the background. There we go. We do have a little bit of. We're doing very well, and I don't know if you have our broadcast on in the background, but I'm getting background feed, so I don't know if that's on your end or on our end. But let's see what we can do to fix that. Hold on one second.
I have nothing on in my background.
All right. Okay, I've got that fixed now. In any event, thank you so much for being here this evening, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I know that you have certainly been one of the leaders in professional wrestling for more than 10 years, but when I found out about the documentary, one of the things that I was interested in is the recovery story, recovering not only from a devastating injury, but also painkiller addiction and overcoming so many obstacles. Kind of give our listeners a little bit of the background as it relates to how the documentary came about and some of the challenges that have come into your life as a result of following the dream, but also kind of being a little bit taken aback because of those injuries and the addiction challenges.
Well, the documentary actually started a year ago about this time. I was in an event called WrestleCade in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where, probably 75 former professional wrestlers are there, and it's an opportunity to mingle with the fans and sell your merchandise and things like that. And as a matter of fact, I was there just this Saturday, again for WrestleCade up in Winston-Salem. But it was at that event last November when Michael Elliott approached me about doing a documentary on my career, and Michael had done several others at Elbow Documentaries or Elbow Docs. He had done one on Ivan Koloff, Harley Race, Crockett Promotions, Magnum TA, The Rock and Roll Express, Jimmy Valiant, and he just did phenomenal work. And he sent me some of the trailers and some of the clips of the documentaries he had done on those that I had just named, and I was very impressed with it. And so we talked more in depth over the next few months about putting something together, and started working on it earlier this year. And had a Kickstarter project to help us raise. We initially wanted to raise $3,500 to help us finish the project, and thanks to the wrestling fans out there, we were able to raise right at $6,000 through Kickstarter, way more than we ever imagined that we would. The wrestling fans just responded. It was unreal, the response that we had, and just the eagerness on their part to help. I think it was a story they wanted to hear. When I got out of wrestling because of the injuries, that was what ended my career, a devastating tricep injury, a knee injury, that just would not allow me to continue to go. The thing that I had counted on all those years to provide a living for me was my body. It allowed me to go out and do what I do and to be who I was in the world of professional wrestling. The body that I had depended on to make that living as a professional wrestler and go out and perform every night failed me. It could no longer do what I needed it to do. And I went through a series of surgeries. I've had a total of 15 orthopedic surgeries as a result of my career in professional wrestling. but before the career ended, due to the injuries, I had developed a dependency on pain medication to try to continue to work, and that was very common, especially during my era in which I wrestled, in which I was a part of pro wrestling. Pharmaceutical drugs were as much a part of the business as boots, tights, trunks, in my case, a mask. They were just as much a part of the business as any of those things. And there were a lot of guys that developed a dependency on medication, pain medication. Now, I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for the others. It didn't start out that way. It started out innocently enough, trying to take a few pills to get through a match, to be able to work through an injury, to try to avoid surgery, to try to prolong a career. But then it turns into something much worse, something you can't control but controls you, and eventually just had my life spiraling out of control and literally come close to costing me my life, but cost me some things that were very important, like my family, my finances, eventually my freedom. I ended up going to prison as a result of the dependency. But I'm thankful that in life we do have second chances, sometimes third and fourth chances. And for about 13 years now, my life has been totally different and nothing like it was during that spiral in dealing with the addiction.
You know, it's so interesting. Obviously, the Patriot character has been part of your career for the majority of that wrestling career, but wearing a mask, you know, the masked persona. A lot of people that have seen you without the mask have said you could have done it without it. I know I saw a clip of the documentary forthcoming where Bruce Pritchard talks about you had all the skills and were never given that full push, so to speak, to get to that championship level. And do you think that a lot of guys wear an internal mask and an external mask, so to speak, when it comes to putting themselves in front of a camera and having to be a performer, but then the lights go off and they still have bills to pay, they still have towns to make, and all the challenges that come along with being an international star while still trying to be a family man, a father, a husband, whatever have you? Is that a challenge that a lot of guys in the industry struggle with in your experience?
It is. It definitely is. There's no doubt about it, especially when you're younger. You're making more money than you ever dreamed you could make. Heck, you're making more money in a month than a lot of Americans make in a year. You're traveling the world, and you're doing so first class. You're working in front of thousands of people every night at live shows, millions every week on TV, millions at pay-per-view events. You're what many people aspire to be. You're what many people want to be around, what many people want to touch, say that they had a drink with, say that they bought a drink for, what women want to tell their friends that they slept with or were able to hook up with. So you're what a lot of people aspire to be or aspire to be around. But yet you're just a normal guy from Columbia, South Carolina, that has a wife back home and you've got 3 kids, or you're just a normal guy from Atlanta, Georgia that's got a girlfriend and you've got a mom and dad. You're still just that normal guy. As a matter of fact, it's funny that you bring this up. I was having breakfast yesterday in Winston-Salem with some friends that are big wrestling fans that attended WrestleCade, and this same subject came up. And I told them, I said, I can't tell you how many nights, and one night in particular that really stands out. I'm in a car with Marcus Bagwell, Randy Savage, and Sting, and we're leaving an arena or a venue in San Francisco. And since Marcus and I were semi-main event, and I think Sting and Savage were involved in the main event, we're obviously the last guys or the last boys to leave the arena, and we're doing so as the arena empties with thousands of fans now flowing into the parking lot. And we're trying to weave our way through the traffic and through the fans and get out of there. And I'm thinking as we drove through that crowd that night, and it's still vivid in my mind even though it was 20-something years ago, wow, I can't believe that these people came to see us. All these people came to see us. We're just regular guys. I mean, we wake up in the morning with bad breath and pillow hair and crust in our eyes, and we sweat and our feet stink, and, you know, we're just like them. We're no different, but this is what we do for a living. And we're on TV, so they think of us in a different capacity. They think that we're different from them. But in fact, we're them. We just do something totally different for a living. We chose this as our career. But yet we go home and our wife gets mad at us, our kids get in trouble at school, our family has problems. We've got a cousin that's an alcoholic, another one that's in rehab. We got all the same problems they have. It's just that we have a different line of work. So I think for a lot of guys, they may struggle balancing being that star, but yet going home and being a regular guy.
If you were to look back, of course, you came from football, transitioned into professional wrestling, and very quickly into your career, the success of the company, of course, the Global Wrestling Federation placed on your shoulders. Talk to people about being less than a couple of years into the business and the expansion of the GWF. What did that feel like to have so much riding on you in your early career? Was it something you believed you were ready for, or were you challenged by being the face, so to speak, of an emerging national company?
Well, it's mixed emotions because, number one, it was unexpected. I had been working for the AWA as the trooper on ESPN every Monday through Friday from 4 to 5 o'clock. Our show came on. But even though we were on TV 5 days a week, the AWA was on life support. We were close to flatlining. That's all we were, was a TV company. And eventually the company did flatline and went out of business and folded and went belly up. So not long after that, I heard the rumblings of this Global Wrestling Federation that was going to come along and was eventually approached by telephone by Bill Eadie and Joe Pedicino, the guys that were going to be in charge and sort of the minds behind the GWF. And they FedExed me a plane ticket to fly to Dallas, Texas for Global's very first TV taping. And we were going to do all our TV tapings at the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, and we were going to call it the Global Dome. That was going to be the headquarters of the Global Wrestling Federation. And we ended up with that same TV spot Monday through Friday on ESPN that the AWA had. And I was told nothing other than, be there. We're going to send you a plane ticket. So nobody said anything to me about the Patriot. That character never entered my mind or crossed my mind. I knew nothing of it. So I took my trooper gear and I flew to Dallas, expecting fully to work as the trooper. And literally just a few hours before the show, Joe Pedicino called me to his hotel room, and there was Bill Eadie, Joe's wife, Bonnie Blackstone, and they threw this on me. They literally had a costume box sitting there. They pulled out the tights, the trunks, the red, white, and blue mask, and said, "What do you think? We think it will work." I said, "I'm in. Let's do it." So that crowd that night saw the Patriot for the first time. And the response we got, I knew that we were on to something good. But it was mixed emotions for me because I knew that I hadn't been in the business very long, and it became apparent very quick that I was going to be the face of the company, the top baby face in the company. Now, we had a great mixture of up-and-coming talent and guys that were established. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, now they're pushing me to be the top guy in the company, to be the face of the company, but there's a lot of established guys around here. There's an Al Perez, and there's a Buddy Landell, and we're bringing in a Terry Gordy, and there's a Bill Eadie, and there's Stan Lane, and there's a lot of these other guys. Now, how are they going to feel about a guy that's as young in the business as I am, being pushed like that, being made the face of the company? So, yeah, there were times that, I really wasn't sure how to react or what to do. But fortunately, everybody that I worked with was a pro about it and bought into it and did what was best for the company. The big problem that Global had was they just didn't have enough money. They didn't have deep enough pockets to make this thing go. And, at first we all thought that maybe this is the third company that could compete with what was in the WWF and WCW. And we all had big dreams of that happening. But because of their lack of finances and their lack of cash and their lack of money to make that thing continue, it just couldn't. It died as well, just like the AWA did. But I got out of there before it died because I had an opportunity, thrown to me to go to Japan and work for Baba. So I took that opportunity. Global continued for a while, but then just started using that local Dallas talent and eventually just withered on the vine.
Interesting to transition to being an international superstar after portraying a character of an American hero. How was the transition to being a performer in the Japanese world, where obviously the crowds are much more, for wrestling fans, of course they know, the crowds are much more reserved and vehemently respectful, but a patriotic character, one would think it would be more difficult to connect with that audience. How was that transition for you?
Well, I tell you, it's a lot different. I can't speak for other companies, but for what was going on in All Japan at the time, and the way they did business, and the way Baba did business, and just the pure genius of Baba and how well it worked. Obviously, you know, the WWF is what it is. It's the most famous company in the world, and just the most well-known company in the world, and worldwide TV. But during the time that I worked for Baba, and I worked for him twice, during the 90s, throughout the 90s, there wasn't a company on the face of the earth that did the business Baba did consistently. Everywhere we went was sold out. Everywhere. We sold out 200 consecutive shows in the Tokyo area. We had a roster of talent that nobody's ever been able to match on both the American and Japanese side. But the way Baba did things, every night, every match, there was a clean finish. There was a 1-2-3. Somebody got their shoulders pinned, one guy got his hand raised, or one tag team got beat, the other won. Our TV show consisted of no interviews. It consisted of no promos. It was an hour of nothing but wrestling. There were no baby faces. There were no heels. There were no managers, no valets. There were no DQs, no double countouts, no disqualifications. Everything was a clean finish. So what sold tickets for us and what drew viewers to our TV show was the quality of the action in the ring. So therefore, I wasn't a babyface or a heel, should I say, going to All Japan. I was accepted greatly there. The fans got in behind me, and Baba gave me a mega push, just like they did in GWF. So it was different trying to, you know, being trained here in America, and the mindset of the American wrestler is there's a babyface, there's a heel, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy. You're doing something behind the ref's back if you're the heel. You're selling like crazy if you're the babyface. None of that concept existed in All Japan. And at first it was a little tough getting used to, but what business we did over there, it was just phenomenal. It was a great place to be, a great place to work.
Certainly a more physical style, more hard-hitting and less playing to the camera, and kind of certainly a more demanding style. Is that where the injuries began, or was that later in your career?
No, that's exactly where they began. Every injury that I ever had while wrestling, and I had some major ones. Obviously, when your career ends because of injuries, you've had some major injuries. Every one that I had and suffered was in All Japan. Every one. I retired because of those injuries when I was in the WWF, but believe me, I was damaged before I ever got to the WWF. And it was that style. When your company and your popularity and the ability to sell out and your TV viewership and your TV ratings is all predicated upon the action in the ring, then it is going to lend itself to a more stiff, more snug style. You've got finishes that are so important there. You could have a 15-minute finish, and you've got big move after big move after big move after big move, 1, 2, 3 kick out, 1, 2, 3 kick out, and you've got just countless false finishes like that. It's going to be a more physical style, and therefore it lends itself. You're more open to injury. And I, too, I didn't help myself. I was a big guy. I was a very athletic big guy. I prided myself in being able to do things that a lot of guys, 6'3", 290 pounds, could not do. Stand up on the top turnbuckle and dive halfway across the ring with a Patriot missile, get up on the top turnbuckle and drop kick, stand in the middle of the ring and drop kick somebody in their forehead at 290 pounds. I prided myself on being a very athletic guy and a very athletic big guy. So I did things like that probably I shouldn't have done, or probably should have done them on a very limited basis, picked my spots to do them. But I did them night after night after night after night. And when you're 290 pounds, and night after night, you're jumping off that top turnbuckle, diving halfway across the ring, landing on your elbows, landing on your knees, your body can only take so much of that. And eventually, you're going to pay the price, and eventually that body is just going to give out on you. And that's what happened to me.
And when the body began to give out, obviously for those who are regular listeners to the program who aren't up to speed with how professional wrestling works, I spent a long time on the independent scene as a broadcaster, and I can speak to this. There is no insurance. There's no union. And so as you go down with injury after injury, not only are you thinking about rehabbing yourself, but also you're thinking about how to feed your family. Is that a big part of where the painkiller culture comes from, is the inability of guys to know where that next payday is coming from, or is it also part of the social subculture at the time?
Well, it's a combination of both. It really is. I can't blame it totally on the desire to continue to work through injury. My generation of wrestlers, and every generation, has had something. You know, I was mentored by Wahoo McDaniel, and I've heard story after story from Wahoo and guys of his generation. They drank heavily. And then along in the 70s came cocaine. So now you've got alcohol and cocaine. Well, then a little later in the late 70s, early 80s, here comes steroids, that big, bulked-up bodybuilding, powerlifting kind of look. And then a little bit later along, my generation introduces prescription pain medication, sleeping pills, muscle relaxers into the mix. Now all of a sudden you've got the alcohol, you've got the cocaine, you've got the steroids, now you've got the prescription pain medication and all the other prescription medications into that big mixing pot, and it was a deadly, deadly toxic combination of things. And so there was that aspect of it. We're trying to stay healthy and we're trying to work, but there was also that when the show's over, let's get back to the room and let's get filled up and let's catch a buzz and let's have a good time. Now, I can honestly say for me, for Del Wilkes, it started due to trying to work through injuries. I had a big old blown up elbow that was just it was like a bunch of grapes just hanging off. I mean, I had fluid that had gathered on my elbow from taking a bad bump out of the ring onto the floor. And I just couldn't hardly move it. I couldn't hardly extend it. I couldn't do what I needed to do. And I'm in a rental car running up and down the road with Kurt Hennig and John Nord. And I'm complaining about this hurt elbow. And Hennig asked me, what are you taking? I said, I'm taking a couple of goody powders, which are basically just aspirin ground up in the powder form. You swallow it down and drink something, and the pain goes away. And he sort of giggled at me and said, are you kidding me? He goes, you don't have anything stronger to take? I said, what do you mean? He said, like a Percocet or a Percodan or a Vicodin or a Lortab, Lorcet. And I was so clueless, I didn't know what those things were. He said, it's prescription pain medication. He goes, and I was under the impression, I was naive. I thought, well, if you took prescription pain medication, you're going to get goofy, you're going to get lightheaded, you're not going to be able to function. I said, well, how do you work on that stuff? And his response to me was, how do you work without it? He said, here, take a few. He gave me a few. Take them before your match tomorrow night. Take them before bed tonight, see if it didn't help you sleep better. And before you work tomorrow night, take a couple and see if it doesn't take the pain away. And it did. It was magic. Brother, I didn't hurt. I felt great. I had energy. I was able to go. It didn't do what I thought it would do to me. It didn't make me goofy and a little groggy and a little lightheaded. It did the exact opposite. I was clear-headed. I was energetic. I didn't have any pain in my elbow. That big old swollen elbow was still there, but it didn't hurt. So I said, wow, man, these things work. Well, those two before that match that night eventually ended up turning into 100 to 120 a day several years down the road. But I can speak for me, no one else. For me, it started out innocent enough. Now, later down the road, once I realized what pain meds could do to you and what sleeping pills could do for you and muscle relaxers, I did incorporate it into that subculture, that party after the show's over back at the room or at the club thing. But that's not how it started for me.
So let's talk for a moment about conscientious promoters for a second. If you were on the other side of the decision-making power and you have the ability to change the industry, because I'm sure it's still a passion for you in one way or another, being so much of your life. What should promoters in that industry do if they start to see a guy slipping so that they can get the best return on their investment? Is it mandatory off-season? Is it emotional and spiritual and mental wellness coaches along with top-notch medical doctors? What would the fix be for situations like that?
I think it's a combination of the things you just mentioned. I think, number one, a lighter workload would be good. I think, not as many shows. I'm not saying you've got to completely shut down and have an off-season. I understand in wrestling it would be very difficult to do that because it's an ongoing storyline. It is a soap opera, that's carried out inside a ring. So I understand that you can't just take weeks or months off, but maybe you can lighten that schedule up somewhat, and maybe you can offer. And I tip my hat to Vince because they have put in place what seems to be a pretty good wellness program. As a former alum of the WWF, I get the quarterly updates, and I get the newsletter, and I get the services that are now offered for guys that are struggling. They do offer rehab at their cost. They do offer counseling and spiritual advice, if that's what people are willing to take. Take a cue from the other sports, from pro football, pro baseball, pro basketball, and the things that they offer. And because you are that's your gravy train. The wellness of the guys that go out and perform for you on a weekly basis, that's your cash cow. If those guys can't, and girls nowadays, if they can't do it at the level they need to, if they are struggling, let's get them better. Let's bring them back better than they were before. If they need help, let's get them help. And again, I tip my hat to Vince because I think they have made great strides in offering the programs that they offer now. But the one thing, or really the one guy that sticks out in my mind that maybe could have been saved, that it was there for all of us to see. And listen, I was seeing it through eyes that were almost as bad as his. But Brian Pillman is a perfect example. There was a guy that was a great talent, but it was obvious right before Pillman died, when he was in the WWF and I was in the WWF, to anyone that was willing to look, and I was already in the thralls of addiction then, but I could see it. This guy is a train wreck. This guy is going to end up in a bad way if somebody does not step in and help him, because of the condition you would see Brian on airplanes, or the condition that you would see Brian in back in the locker room, the condition that Brian tried to go to the ring in one night. It was painfully obvious that this guy was slipping and slipping fast, and something needed to be done. Forced rehab, take him off the road, make him go. But unfortunately, it wasn't done. And then we got the word one Sunday morning that Brian, or one Sunday afternoon at a pay-per-view, that the motel the boys were at the night before, Brian never checked out because Brian died in his sleep. And that is just that example to me that is just so tragic, that really, really stands out, that, man, this guy was crying out for help. And I wish somebody would have been willing to step up to the plate and just say, look, we're going to do it. We've got to help this guy. But nobody did.
And it's a difficult world in that, your colleagues are also your competitors, so to speak. If you're off TV for a month, if you're off TV for 3 months nursing a back injury or a neck injury, or in your case a tricep injury, they're gaining that valuable TV time, and so they want to see you get better, obviously, because they like you as a person, but at the same time, if you go down, there's opportunity knocking at their door. So there's that internal struggle that may cause guys to turn the other way when someone's popping a pill. Is that a major part of the culture as well, where everyone kind of turns a blind eye and says, well, it's your life, and so we're not going to get too involved, because if it were me, I wouldn't want someone to push my spot out? Or is it more an unwritten code in the industry that everybody makes their own decisions and no one stays too hard on watching what everyone else is doing?
Well, it is a lot of that. Hey, that's your life, dude. If that's the way you want to live it. And unfortunately, at that time that Brian was going through what he was going through, there were so many of us that were really going through the same thing. Just at that time, maybe not as bad as Brian. There were a lot of guys in that company that are now dead that was living almost like Brian was. I was one of them. So how can I really reach out to Brian when I'm in the same mess he's in? And also to that intense pressure, whether it's placed on you by the company or it's placed on you by yourself. And I know most of us place it on ourselves. We do it ourselves. When I first tore my tricep, I literally ripped my tricep tendon off the bone, and as the doctor described it to me, it rolled up the back of your arm bell like an old-fashioned window shade, and it's just rolled up to the top of your shoulder now. We got to go in and roll it back down and anchor it back to your bone. So I had the surgery done. I had the injury in late December in Japan, and I worked about 10 days with it that way. I got back to the States, and immediately after Christmas, I had the injury to reattach my tricep. And the doctor told me, he said, look, if you worked in any other profession than the one you work in, you can go back to work in a few weeks. But you don't. You don't sit behind a desk. You don't work on a computer. You know, you don't make sales calls. You're a professional wrestler. And you need to take a year to let this thing heal the proper way and for you to go through the necessary rehab and rehabilitation you need so that you can get your body back to where you can do what you do for a living. And I knew immediately when he told me a year. I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? I'm nodding my head as he's talking to me in agreement, going, sure, I understand, Doc, absolutely. Yes, sir, I agree with you. And I'm thinking to myself, you must be crazy. I can't take a year off. I can't take 6 months off. Man, come on. I make a living in a industry where there's not a lot of people that make a full-time living doing what I do. And there's always somebody wanting that spot. Out of sight, out of mind. You let me take a year off TV. You let me take a year out of the ring for Mr. Baba. Do you think I'm going to go back with the same steam that I left with? Absolutely not. So I made the decision that I was going back as quick as I possibly could, and I went back about 4.5 months later when the doctor had advised me to take a year. And I went back 10 days, and it tore again. So obviously going back too quick did not do me any good. It hurt me even worse. But still, you're under that pressure. Well, man, I cannot. There's no way I can sit home for a year, 9 months, 6 months. You can't do it.
And certainly at the time you went back, we're talking probably mid to later in the 90s when it became a very television-orientated business and storylines and angles would move at a much faster clip. And so a month or two off television might as well be the same as a season off an episodic television program. Was there internal pressure from the office at the time, get back, even though we want you to be well, you just have to be well enough to tape it up and continue going? Or did you have the leverage of being able to take more time and the internal pressure was too much?
Well, I can honestly say that from the standpoint of working for Mr. Baba, there was no pressure from Baba, really, to do that. Now, I placed all that pressure on myself. Baba didn't have to place it on me. I knew I just couldn't take that amount of time off. There was no way I couldn't do it. Now, in the States, it was a little different. By the time I got to the WWF, like I said, I was already damaged goods. I'd signed a 3-year deal with them. And, being truthfully honest, I had no grand illusions of being able to fulfill the 3-year deal. I mean, we all know our body, and I knew I was in bad shape. I was in bad shape. I had a knee that was completely blown out, had a tricep that was completely blown out, and I've since had that knee replaced twice, and I had numerous surgeries on my tricep, later. So I knew that, man, I'm on borrowed time, and I got to make the best of it here. So I was very limited, or somewhat limited, into what I could do. There were things that I just didn't feel comfortable doing in the ring because of those injuries, things that I at one time was able to do. And I even had Vince, there was a TV, and a lot of times things run together, and you can't remember what city it was in, but it was a TV where the Hart Foundation, I think Brett was going to have a match with Vader, and the Hart Foundation was going to come out and interfere in the match, and they were going to get Vader outside of the ring and put the boots to him. And Vince and Pat Patterson wanted me to come down the ramp, which was on the other side of the ring where Vader was, in the Hart Foundation, where they're putting the boots to Vader out on the floor or out on the mat next to the ring. And what they wanted me to do was slide up under the bottom rope and then run across the ring and dive over the top rope and dive onto Brett and Davey Boy and Owen and let those guys catch me and fall to the floor. Well, at 12 o'clock that day when you get to the building, it sounds like a good idea. Well, you got a lot of time. The show didn't start till 9 o'clock, so I've got 9 hours to think about this thing. And I thought, man, I just don't think I can do that with this big, heavy knee brace on. I've got a knee that's completely blown out. I can't really get good push off with it. Got a tricep that's blown. I just don't think I can do that. So without saying anything to anybody, the only thing in the match or the only thing in the running that changed was instead of me diving over the top rope out on the floor, I just rolled up under the bottom rope on the other side of the ring and got it on the floor and started, putting it to the Hart Foundation, making a big comeback on Vader's behalf. And everything continued as if it was supposed to. Well, later that night, boy, Vince was really unpleased. He said, I thought we had agreed that you were going to dive over that top rope. I said, Vince, I did. I said I would do that. I said, but honestly, I just don't think I can. And listen, I'd gone to work. I'd hid those injuries from Vince. He didn't know I had a knee that was blown out. He didn't know I had a tricep that was blown out. He was unaware of any of that. And I said, Vince, I'm going to tell you, I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. I said, so I just thought I could roll under the rope, out on the floor, and do the same thing. Well, that's not what we said we were going to do. And if you can't do what we need you to do, if all you can do is roll out on the floor and throw punches with that big old left hand, we can find somebody else that can do it. If we set up a spot, you're going to do it. And, he got all hot and bothered and lathered up around the neck. But so, yeah, we don't care. Of course, he didn't know I was hurt, but, the expectations are there from them and the pressure's there from them. You got to perform at a high level, and if you can't, somebody else will.
And, being in that position, of course, Bret Hart, I believe at the time, was the heavyweight champion, and a lot of pressure was put on you in the late 90s. I think that was 97, if I remember correctly, to perform at the best rate of your career. And now that spotlight, which for every professional wrestler, they're living on borrowed time from when they start their career. I believe it was Arn Anderson once that said in an interview that every time you take a bump, it's like a car crash. And so how many car crashes can you get into before your body doesn't get up? And so you probably were looking at that and saying, this is my potentially last big money run, and you didn't want to disappoint the boss, but at the same time you wanted a body that could still go. Do you look back on that time and wish that you had been either more honest or in different shape? How do you feel you could have, looking back, gotten more out of that run at the top of your career and created for yourself a better legacy in terms of how you wanted to leave versus injuries taking you away from the sport?
Well, I don't know that there was a lot different I could have done with those injuries. That was something that happened. It was a part of the business. I liken it to a guy that played football here at South Carolina just a few years ago. Coming out of high school, Marcus Lattimore was the highest-rated running back in America at a high school in the upstate here in South Carolina. Everybody wanted him. He chose the University of South Carolina and was a unbelievable running back, one that everybody knew had NFL potential, and not just potential to play in that league, but to be a star in that league. And it was ended because of two devastating knee injuries. Marcus had no control over that. It just happened. It was a part of the sport that he agreed to play and chose to play. And so I don't know that there was a lot I could have done, from that standpoint, because those injuries happened. I really couldn't prevent them. I didn't want them to happen, but they did. Now, looking back on it, should I have been more upfront with Vince about my injuries? Probably so, but I felt like in my negotiations with him when I first met with him, if I sat down with him and say, Vince, listen, I know you're interested in me working in your company. I appreciate you flying me in for the interview. I appreciate the interest, but I just want you to know I want to work for you too, but I've got a knee that's completely blown out and I've got a tricep that's completely blown out. I don't know if Vince's interest for me then is the same as it was, prior to me telling him that. So I felt it was in my best interest to keep that to myself. And so I didn't come clean with him, and I wasn't upfront with him about that. But it was an act of self-preservation. I thought that I had to do that. And so, sure, I would have wished. I came in that company and was immediately placed in an angle with their world heavyweight champ, their top heel. And I'm all of a sudden put in an angle with him immediately. It couldn't have been any better. But unfortunately, my body was for where it was. And there was nothing I could do about that. And, it just was what it was. The timing was good, but it was also very bad. And unfortunately, that's just life sometimes.
When you look back at your career, over a decade in the industry, or just about at a decade, are there one or two moments that to you stand out and say, when I was a kid, I thought that I might like to try wrestling. I finally made it. Those aha moments where you see yourself as the star you dreamed of being when you were younger. Can you share the excitement of some of those moments for you?
Oh, absolutely. The earliest of those moments for me were you got that satisfaction inside. You didn't have to share it with anybody, but you knew that, wow, man, my hard work's paid off. And the dream that I've had, all that work, that effort, that sacrifice, yes, it's paying dividends. I was working in the AWA as the trooper. And, of course, they had made me their top babyface there. Even though it was a company that was, again, like I said, on life support, still, the fact that they had given me a push as their top babyface. And we're working in Jamestown, North Dakota. It's not TV, it's just a house show. But I get to the building, and Greg Gagne pulls me aside, and Vern Gagne pulls me aside, and they said, hey, you're working main event tonight with Harley. And they said, Harley's putting you over. And my immediate response was, is Harley aware of this? And they said, absolutely. Harley's fine with it. He thinks it's what we need to do for you, to give you some credibility. So that was the first moment. And then there was a moment in Global where also, again, they placed the responsibility on me of being their top babyface. And at one time, I had 2 belts. And then there's the moment of going to All Japan as the Patriot, where I had gone 2 years before as the Trooper and had totally fallen on my face. I mean, I got my doors blown off. I was totally unprepared for my first trip to All Japan and felt miserable and thought I would never go back. And I got the chance to go back in May of 1992 and work as the Patriot. And the reception I got in 3 days into a 4-week tour, Baba pulls me aside and said, you want to work for this company full time? I said, I do. He said, well, you've got a job. And in the industry then, at that time, it was looked at as if you could work for Baba full time, if you could work for Inoki full time, then you were pretty darn good and you were doing something right. To have the privilege of working for one of those 2 companies full time, to be a full-time hand for either one of those, was truly a feather in your cap. And then to be in WCW and twice have the tag team belts around our waist, the Stars and Stripes with my partner Bagwell, was a great moment in my career. And then to top it all off, to go to the WWF and be put in an angle with Bret Hart and get a win over Bret on Monday night on Raw also is another moment. All those moments are moments in your career where you go, wow, I made the right move here. I've done something right. I've put enough work. I've put enough effort, enough sacrifice into this. The people like me. They think I'm worthy of what they've done here, and you feel good about what you've done. And I'm very thankful that I've got a lot of those moments throughout my career that I'll always be able to look back on and with a lot of pride and be proud of what I accomplished. Did it last as long as I wanted it to, what I initially dreamed it would? No. But again, I have no control over that. Those were injuries. That's life sometimes.
And now let's move forward into, in the last quarter hour of this interview, talk a little bit about the documentary. I know that there's a lot about your life and the story of the decisions you made in a world that moves very, very fast. If you're not in front of the camera, you're often forgotten. And the man behind the mask is also a story of personal redemption, overcoming the painkiller addiction, overcoming the addiction to being in front of a crowd, which I think a lot in the industry isn't spoken about that. But there's also the mental addiction. What do you do when that light goes down? Could you talk a little bit about why the project was so special to you, and going forward, are there plans for maybe a tour upon a greater release? Are there plans for another segment to the documentary? What are you looking to do as we head into 2016 and beyond to cement the legacy of Del Wilkes, of the Patriot character, and how is it that you would want to be remembered in an industry that you gave so much to?
Well, the documentary was important for me, and again, it was not anything that I'd ever dreamed of or thought about doing. I was approached by Michael about doing it, but for several reasons. One, when I got out of the business, I disconnected, I divorced myself from the business, and I fell off the face of the wrestling earth for a long, long time. Because when I got out, I was in a mess. Brother, I was in a big mess. I was a body that was just beat down, shattered, torn to pieces. Just a completely destroyed body from that business, and also coupled with the 13 years of football that I played as well. So you couple that together, and I had a body that was just wrecked. You couple that with a horrible addiction that lasted several years after I got out of the business. And then eventually that addiction led to major issues with law enforcement. I was forging prescriptions to get the pain medication that I desperately needed to be able to survive a day. So, I had talked that when I got out of the business, Vince said, look, dude, go get healthy. Get the surgeries you need. Come back, and I'll take you back. And if you can work a full-time schedule, you can. If you can't, I'll work you a limited schedule. But I was in no condition to do that, because not only did I have to get better from the injuries, I had to get better from the addiction. And that took a while. It took a long time to rebuild me. So it was important in doing the documentary that I could let people know what happened to me and where I was and what went on in my life. And I know that some maybe knew, but others didn't. So I wanted to tell the story, the true story, the whole story about Del Wilkes and what happened, but where he's at now, how his life is in a much better place. And I also wanted to tell it from a standpoint of hoping it could help somebody, that it could be of importance to somebody, because there are people out there that struggle daily with the exact same thing that I struggled with, that ripped my world apart, that eventually forced me into a South Carolina prison, that you could overcome that you could come out the other side if you were willing to fight hard enough to get the help you need, to lean on your faith, your family, your friends, that you could come through that. There's life after that if you're willing to put in the effort. So it was important to me in both of those areas to do it, and that it be done well, and that we tell the whole story from birth to where I'm at right now, and to be very transparent. Don't hold anything back. Tell the whole story, warts and all. There's a lot of great stuff there. There's a great career in college football, in pro wrestling. There's a big, big descent afterwards. But there's also been a climb back up, and to let them know where we're at today. And by doing this, it has opened up an awful lot of opportunities for me, opportunities that didn't exist a few years ago. Now doing Fan Fest and WrestleCades and WrestleCon next year, and making personal appearances and being able to share my story, whether it be at schools, at churches, at business functions, and things like that. Being, again, a part of the wrestling industry in some capacity. So it's been therapeutic for me, too, to be able to do that. So not only did it allow me to tell my story, to hopefully be able to help somebody else, but it's allowed me to once again connect with the wrestling business and to be a part of it again in a different capacity. And we've been able to get the story out about the documentary through podcasts like yours, and it's at my website, www.delthepatriotwilkes.com. You can go to the website and get it'll link you up to a PayPal where you can get the documentary, and it's a 3-disc DVD set. It's over 7 hours. It got my family members. It's a sit-down interview with me, A lot of the great matches from Japan, a lot of the guys that I wrestled with throughout my career agreed to be a part of this, and I'm very thankful. Stan Hansen, Greg Gagne, Bruce Pritchard, Bill Apter, Marcus Backrell, Jackie Fulton, Bobby Fulton, just a list of guys I played football with at South Carolina, including the 1980 Heisman Trophy winner, George Rogers, that was a teammate of mine. All those people agreed to be a part of this and make it just a great story, a great documentary that it is. We're very proud of it. And I think anyone, I know from speaking to those that have purchased it and watched it, they've really enjoyed it. And I know that anyone else that gets the DVD and watches it will see a great story and really enjoy watching what they watch and be inspired by what they see and hear.
And here's something we're going to do here at the Power of Perception Radio Network, and I'm not even sure that, Del, I didn't even mention this to you, but if anybody purchases, either listening live tonight or listening in the archive, if anybody purchases and sends me either a PayPal receipt or some proof of purchase, I'm going to give them a free 30-minute session of my coaching services because I believe in your story that much. I believe in the story that somebody deserves a second chance after hitting that rock bottom, and I go through that with my coaching clients all the time. And that was one reason we reached out to you here, because there is that second chance after that rock bottom moment. And to be able to authentically share that, now you said with schools and churches, but also with a community where admitting to addiction and admitting to weakness, kind of a dirty word, there's such courage in that. And that's a story that needs to be told.
Well, I agree, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing that and your willingness to do that. That means an awful lot, and I thank you very much. And you're exactly right. It is. There are people to rehab 4 times, and it didn't work. I went to prison. Before I went to prison, I'd been arrested 28 times for forging prescription drugs. So it was like I never reached my rock bottom, and I'm sure there were a lot of people that were willing to give up on me and did. But thank goodness there were those that didn't give up. I thank the Lord He didn't give up on me. I thank goodness that my family didn't give up on me and that a lot of my friends didn't give up on me after 28 arrests, after 4 stints in rehab. And I was able to walk out of a prison on Valentine's Day of 2003, a changed man. A man that's not been back to jail since then, that's not had to appear at a bond hearing since then, that's not had to go to rehab since then. So you can overcome. And I appreciate you doing what you do. I'll never be able to express to you my debt of gratitude to you for doing that and for having me on.
Well, I do want to touch on one final thing, and that is we talked off the air about other people using the Patriot name, and I want to give you we've got about 7 minutes remaining. I want to give you a minute or two to talk about the truth of what happened with the Patriot character and was it sold? Did somebody else take it without your permission? Did they take it when you were down? What really happened with that story?
It was never sold to anyone, to no one, ever. There was an individual that did try to take it, but all he was able to do was get the right to advertise it overseas on a poster. He wanted to run shows overseas and supposedly couldn't get a hold of me, so he wanted to use someone as the Patriot character. He thought it would go well overseas. But no, it wasn't taken. It wasn't sold. It's crazy how these stories start and how they grow, but there is an individual, Tom Brandy, that does run around pretending to be me. He takes my bio, he takes my resume, and he attaches it to him as if it was his, as if he's lived it, as if he's done it. He even goes as far as telling people he is Del Wilkes. I have talked with hundreds of wrestling fans who have attended shows where the Patriot was working, and they were suspicious and were able to ask before or after the show, "Hey, are you Del Wilkes?" And the response they get is, yeah, man, that's me. And he sticks a hand out and shakes it. He signs pictures of me, my pictures that he sells at these shows. I even had a guy this past weekend at WrestleCade express his unbelievable pleasure that he was able to finally meet Del Wilkes. He said, "You won't believe how many action figures of yours I've had signed by guys that pretended to be you and said they were you. So it's just crazy. It's pathetic. It's ludicrous that a guy has to do this just to totally pretend to be someone he's not. He's a fraud. He's a phony. He's a charlatan. But no, it wasn't sold to him. And it wasn't until just 4, 5, 6 years ago maybe that it was brought to my attention that it was on the Internet that I had sold it to him. But no, nothing could be further from the truth. It's just a pathetic guy that really could never establish a successful career on his own, but now is taking an opportunity to run around and hoodwinking people into thinking that he is Del Wilkes.
All right, and I wanted to give you the professional courtesy of being able to address that, because I don't know that I've heard you address it anywhere, and if you had, well, always reconfirming the truth is always a good thing. With the final 4 minutes, I want to give you the opportunity once again to give out information about how people can go about getting the documentary. I also want to encourage everybody, you are listening to Power of Perception Radio Network. This is Scott Golden. If you buy Del's documentary, and you can furnish proof of purchase either on our Twitter account at PO Perception and or to our team here at the Power of Perception Radio Network. That's at poperception@AOL.com. I will give you a free 30-minute life coaching session just because I believe in the story, and I know, even from the clips I've seen of the documentary, I know it's going to change your view of the world, and that's why we're standing behind it so strongly here as part of the Power of Perception team. But Del, give them that opportunity one more time to make that purchase. Where can they go to get the documentary? Can they get an autographed copy? How do they do that?
They could go to PayPal and go to, or you could go to my website. I'm sorry, www.delthepatriotwilkes.com, and it'll send you to a link, to a PayPal link. And the DVD, the 3-disc set, is $20. And we also have to charge $5 for shipping and handling anywhere in the United States. It actually costs me about $5.60 to ship it out, but we're charging $5. We have to charge $16 to ship it overseas. It actually costs me a little over $16, but $16 is what we charge to ship it overseas. And you can get the autographed documentary there. I'll personally autograph it, and but you can go to our website at delthepatriotwilkes.com and not only get the documentary, but you can get other things: autographed masks, autographed pictures, autographed American flags, and www.delthepatriotwilkes.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Del. Love to have you back on in the future if there's other things that you'd like to promote, or if there's other people maybe in the sports community, in the wrestling community, football community that you think have an interesting story. Please send them over this way. And we'd love to have you on again down the road, because I'm sure you could probably fill about 10 to 12 hours with the stories you have from the road, one way or another.
Well, I'm sure I could, and it's always fun. I love pro wrestling. I have since a 7-year-old boy, so I can always talk about it and always take great pleasure in doing so. And I certainly do appreciate you having me on, giving me the opportunity, and again, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate what you've done tonight as well. So thank you.
All right. Take care. And with that, we will be here tomorrow. We have another guest, nail artist and inspirational speaker is going to be with us tomorrow. We've got several other guests, authors, and the like going into the rest of the week. If you want to be a guest, if you want to be a show supporter or advertiser, please get a hold of us at poperception@AOL.com. My team will always get back to you within 24 hours. You know, this is one of the hallmarks of why we do what we do around here, because who would have thought that story would take so many twists and turns, but turn out with such a positive outlook. You know, that's what the power of perception is all about. It's all how you look at it, all how you spin things around and turn things around and get on your comeback trail. So until tomorrow, this is Scott Golden reminding you, keep your feet on the ground and your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.